morning. Where are you?
I'm in the bedroom.
Okay. It's coming up.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi, how are you? I was just trying on this new dress. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. It's a nice colour. Really, I really like the colour.
But what about the dress?
I think it's good. It's good.
You don't like it, do you?
Yeah. It's a very nice colour. It suits you, the colour. What's the matter? You know?
Nothing. I'm fine.
Oh, you're fine. Okay. I shall get on. Well, in this communication that you've just heard, we heard that Lynn's fine. Or is she? What did you say?
I'm fine.
I'm fine. Does that mean she's fine? If you were really fine, what would you say?
I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm fine. It's words, isn't it? Lynn says she's just fine, but in the sketch we've just done, clearly she wasn't fine. They were the words, I'm fine, but from her tone of voice and her body language and her attitude, we could see quite clearly she was not fine. When she asks, do I look good in this dress? I've come to understand that actually she's not looking for a fashion statement. What she's looking for is that she wants to hear that I still love her and think she looks good, despite perhaps losing a little of her youthful beauty.
So sometimes, as we've said before, we ladies often speak abstractly and expect our husbands to know just what we're talking about. In fact, we may not even tell the full truth. By saying I'm fine in all sorts of different ways, we are not saying we're fine at all. We could be fine. We could be sad. We could be hurt about things. We could be angry about things. So we need to really be clear about what we're trying to say. And the more indirect we are, the more we confuse them. And so we need to, and then Mike has to try and use his problem-solving skills, of which he has a certain amount, but perhaps not enough to come up with the right answer.
I have learnt what I'm fine means after many years.
So we need to make it clear what we really mean in the first place.
Also, we can prepare the ground for each other. We can make it easier for our spouse by creating a safe environment so they feel they're comfortable in sharing rather than being defensive and argue. If we don't argue about, but instead we listen and be empathetic maybe, and try and lower the emotion of the situation. Listen carefully, and then we can. The ground will be a lot easier for us to share those things, and for our spouse to say how they really feel. She won't feel threatened to say what she wants if we're in a comfortable situation where we're both listening, we're both sitting down and relaxed and ready to hear what we want to say. Also, it's important that we listen actively. We don't just sort of sit passively. Listen actively means sometimes we could, if we're not quite clear and it's really important, we could repeat what we think they've said in our own words. You said this, let me try and sum it up in my own words just to make sure I fully understand what you said. And then we use our own words to repeat what they've said. And sometimes it will be that we haven't really understood, and then we can have the conversation and make sure we properly understood. So we can clarify the message, and then we'll know how to respond, and we can talk together about that.
I think it's also worth, if it's possible, waiting for the right time to have these conversations, especially if they're very important ones that we want to get across, that if we wait for a time where things are on an even keel, it's not a good time to do it when one of us is stressed or in the middle of something else. It's not going to help the response and the ultimate outcome of it. So choosing our time is a helpful thing too. So A message from us all from the Bible about speaking clearly and directly to avoiding misunderstanding. Ephesians 4:14 and 15 tells us not to deceive each other, but instead to speak the truth in love.
How was your day today?
I suppose it was all right, but there was just so much I wanted to do. I did an awful lot, but I didn't get everything done, and I just don't know how on earth. I'm just going to have to keep going, and I'll eventually get there.
Well, maybe if you scheduled the things you want to do and put into a plan, then you could get the things done that are really important, and you wouldn't feel frustrated.
I'm not a plan sort of person. I just keep going.
Well, you know that I can plan quite well because I have to do it for work. I tell you what, we could sit down together over a nice cup of tea, and you could tell me all the things you want to do, and then we could look at the priority of them, which ones are important, and then we could schedule the things and plan them into your day, and then you'll have a more satisfying day.
No, I don't really want you to. All you're trying to do is fix me. I don't want that. I just want to carry on, okay?
Well, just trying to help.
I know.
Well, I don't know if any of you can identify with that. Certainly we can, because we often try and fix each other, and we're certainly not very good at empathising with each other when the other one needs it, and it can work both ways. Sometimes we feel that our spouse never talks to us anymore, or we don't have anything in common anymore, which is probably not true. But what it does mean is that our spouse is not talking to us in the way that we would want them to. And often one person, often the woman, has a greater need for conversation and for communication day by day, hour by hour. And on average, men and women use quite different numbers of words each day. A man will use about 30,000 words a day, but a woman will use about 50,000 words a day.
Not everybody. We do know people where the man speaks a lot more than the woman. So it's certainly an average, not a...
Yes.
It's a norm, not for everybody.
Of course, yes. And also, if you see children playing, you'll see the difference in how they speak to each other when they're playing. Little girls often talk a lot while they're playing, where little boys tend to be more dealing with the action they're having in their playing and not doing the talking at the same time.
Yeah, so certainly for me, I like to analyse situations and work out the strategy to deal with the situation, particularly if there's a problem. I like to fix a problem, and so I'm satisfied when the problem's fixed, and I feel much happier about that. But that doesn't always suit both of us. And then sometimes will come and I know she's a bit upset, and actually she's not about wanting me to fix anything. All she wants to do is have me listen to her.
Or have a hug.
Or have a hug. Indeed, that's often the way. Lynn's first love language is touch, so a hug is really important. And we need to understand our wives and our husbands so that we can respond to them in the way that they need. And also look at the situation. Does it look like that person wants something fixed? Are they saying they want something fixed? Or does it look like they just want to talk and you want you to listen and empathise with them?
So we need to be intimate with each other, but how do we do that? Women often tend to build relationships in building that intimacy, where our spouses tend to build the activity things that we do together, and lots of things we do. Mike's one is quality time. He wants us to be doing things together, where I would want to be talking instead. So I'm focusing on how we're feeling with the emotions, and Mike is focusing on doing things. And a quote which sums this up well is,
husbands typically have no idea how the need for intimacy runs in their wives. Husbands are often baffled by it, since their focus tends to be more on activity, on doing, while their wives tend to focus more on building relationships, on being. Not only are husbands surprised by the intensity of their wife's needs, but they're also shocked that their wives expect them to meet it. And studies have found that women tend to use both sides of their brains while they're speaking. That may not be true for everybody, but in general, that's been what the studies have shown. Whereas men tend to concentrate on the logic side of their brain. And actually for us, that's not always true, because I tend to be the one that can do lots of things at once. And Lynn tends to be doing the one thing, and she doesn't want to be disturbed.
Sadly, yes,
from
Mike is a brilliant multitasker, and one thing is quite enough for me, thank you.
Also, in general, women tend to understand body language better than us men. Again, not always the case. But they see it as part of the conversation, and we'll look carefully for what we're saying with our bodies as well. It's said that intimacy for women spells CONVRSATION, which is
Conversation.
Whereas for men, it can be spelled differently. It could be COMPANIONSHIP.
Companionship.
Or more simply, SEX, which probably needs no further explanation. And for many women, conversation is the road to intimacy. While for men, conversation can be the road to a solution.
So there's many types of different intimacy, and they're all important for relationship and for understanding each other. The first type of intimacy is emotional intimacy, the feeling of being connected together, doing things together, enjoying romance, being cherished so that we feel that we're the most important person to the other one. And that when we ask our spouse, how do we look, as we said earlier, it's not because we really want to know that. We want to know that we've got a confirmation that they think we look good, just a full stop, in whatever we're wearing. It's not what we're wearing, it's how we appear to them generally. So what about spiritual intimacy? That's connecting with each other in our spiritual lives. We can pray together, worship together. We're usually doing it holding hands. Have I got a hand, Mike? I've got a hand, good. And discussing spiritual things, reading the Bible together or discussing spiritual experiences. Then the third one is about mental intimacy, conversation, sharing our thoughts and our ideas and our reflections, talking about the things which are important to us. And lastly, the physical intimacy, our physical presence and touching, closeness, even just eye contact.
Being there for each other physically as well. And, hugging is particularly important for us.
Absolutely.
So if we're going to grow in our relationship and improve our understanding of each other, we need to become more intimate in all of these ways. And men in particular need to understand their wife's need for intimacy in these different ways. We also need to listen. And listening is really important, and we can listen in lots of different ways. For instance, there is an objective or empathetic listening. So empathetic listening means focusing on understanding the other person and feeling with them, understanding what they're really saying and working with them. Whereas objective listening focuses on the facts, on the problems, on the solutions. Now, we need to do both of these things because problems need solutions, but often we need to sit down and listen what's on our spouse's heart before we seek to fix the solution. And then this in-depth listening versus just surface listening. So in the sketch, Lynn needed to hear I needed to hear the plea of her heart. I needed to hear the frustration that was there. But I only heard the words, which seemed to me to require a solution. So we need to listen carefully to what's really being said with the whole person. Then there's active listening. Active listening seeks to discover the full meaning by asking for further clarification. Could be by paraphrasing the problem in our own words, as we said earlier, to ensure that we fully understand what's being said, because we often say things differently and in different ways. And then there's non-judgmental or critical listening. And we need to make sure that we understand fully before we form any judgment on what's being said or even evaluate it. We need to hear the whole story. Often good to remember that we've got 2 ears and we've got 1 mouth. And that can be said for all of us.
I think it's also important to remember that we need to be listening so that we understand, not listening so that we can formulate our reply. we need to be taking what they're saying on board without considering what we're going to say next too. And just to finish with a little quote from a book we use quite often called Wit and Wisdom. It says, "Marriage is not about fixing, it's about mixing. Love doesn't drive us to fix the other person. It gives us the courage to mix strengths and weaknesses, our positives and negatives, our hopes and our fears, into an invigorating marriage full of life and newness and dreams."